Hi everyone, thanks for being here today. This project is actually a collaboration between myself and Brian Crawford, a fellow Icon graduate student and Warnellian. So we are still masters of our fate, captains of our soul, and this is true insofar as we make decisions every day that determine kind of what our opportunities and future might look like. And so decision making is really a powerful kind of juncture for illuminating the possibilities and how we might capitalize on them. So conservation and management decisions are very challenging. If they weren't, many of us wouldn't be here today. And they're challenging for a number of reasons. They're really complex. So there's a lot of interrelationships in the socio-ecological systems in which we work and that we study. There's challenges in integrating and working across different scales, whether those are organizational scales or ecological scales. There's many perspectives on what the problems are, and any of those perspectives are inherently partial, and so they illuminate certain dimensions of the problem while obscuring others. And they mean that different people have different ideas about what is important, what different outcomes of different actions might be. And those plural perspectives mean that there are different objectives that we're trying to achieve. And so there are inherently trade-offs among achieving all the things that we want to. Getting more of one thing might mean getting less of another. And the trade-offs mean that the benefits and burdens of management decisions are not equitably distributed among the population. And in spite of our best efforts to collect more data and understand, we always have to make decisions in the absence of perfect understanding or complete information. So in recent decades, structured decision making has emerged as a very popular tool for going about decision making when you're dealing with complexity and trade-offs and uncertainty. It decomposes a decision problem into its constituent elements. So facts have a role independent from values, recognizing that both are very important, but they need to be dealt with differently. Facts are information about what might happen, and values are how people feel about those things. So the structured decision-making process, you start by defining your problem. Then you identify your objectives. What do you care about? Where are you trying to go? And only after you do that do you start thinking about your alternative options, the different paths that you might take to get to those objectives that you care about. Then you compile what you know, all those facts, to evaluate what the possible consequences might be of different alternative actions as measured by your objectives in terms of the things that you actually care about. And then once you have all that information, you can actually evaluate what trade-offs are you really making with the options that you're considering in light of what you really care about. And it's iterative. So the integrative framework that we're kind of indoctrinated into during our first year of Icon has these three kind of parallel processing, three ways of parallel processing, these different integrative lenses. So the value and valuation, we need methods that allow us to account for values, identify what they are, and then make comparisons among different values. Process and governance lens says that we need good ways to engage people. Who is engaged and how they're engaged is very important in terms of what outcomes we might come to. And then power inequality, any kind of public process or methods for engagement are not independent from power dynamics. And so at best, we need to at least make those kind of, those acts of power transparent and our decision making to be easy to understand. So structured decision making, how does it kind of function as this potential process catalyst for integration? It's a type of, so structured decision making isn't a unified theory, it's not a set approach. It's more a way of thinking and approaching things to get insight. It's a bundle of tools. And it really facilitates deliberation among different actors with different perspectives that leads to insights that can guide decision making. It's value focused, so as I mentioned, you talk about your objectives first, you put the values at the forefront, and then facts have a different role and are dealt with differently later on. And then it provides a structure for learning and adaptation over time. So you have some understanding of what your consequences might be of different actions. Once you actually choose a certain alternative, you can go back to your consequences and say, well, did we really expect what we actually found after we implemented that alternative? So there's this structure for actually formally incorporating new information over time and letting that drive your decision making. But in addition to having this great kind of process for getting everyone to the table, you also need something else. You need a willingness to collaborate, a willingness to engage. And where does that come from? Well, it's this social capital, these relationships that we have with one another that enable us to work together towards some kind of collective benefit. So social, psychological, cultural assets that we maintain between us. And these make it easier to work together, so they lower the transaction costs, they help enhance our cooperative behavior, and it enables us to sustain that cooperation even in the face of setbacks. So even when there are hardships or things change, you have something that enables you to keep working together. So Brian and I conducted this pilot analysis. So we were interested in kind of what are the outcomes of structured decision-making processes? Do they facilitate social learning, so integration of different perspectives and types of information, and allow for a systems orientation so that you're recognizing how things are connected and how the different pieces fit together? Does it generate social capital? Does it actually facilitate the cultivation of trust, this social obligation for honesty with other group members? Does it facilitate increases in exchanges, so mutually two-way flowing goods and services and knowledge, skills? Does it help create norms and rules, so new behaviors that ensure that different actors within the group are going to behave in a way that is complementary to the group's overall objective? And does it increase connectedness? So this is connectedness horizontally with people that are similar to you, connectedness with people that have different perspectives than you, and then also vertical connections, so to funding agencies or people in positions of power so that different actors can leverage more resources or influence policy. And does it lead to an actual decision? These last two objectives I'm not going to touch on today, so I'll breeze through them. So the National Conservation Training Center is operated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and since 2006, they've had over 100 multi-stakeholder group teams come to participate in a structured decision-making workshop. So during this workshop, they propose some kind of decision problem that they're really grappling with at their home context. And then all of those actors arrive together in West Virginia at the National Conservation Training Center campus, and over the course of a week, they're facilitated and trained in doing structured decision-making, typically it's always by volunteer coaches, but typically those volunteer coaches come from USGS or US Fish and Wildlife Service. And oftentimes those decision problems they're working on are some kind of fish and wildlife management decision problem that the US Fish and Wildlife Service is involved in some way. So we developed a survey that we administered using Qualtrics online. We weren't able to access the participant contact information for the more than 100 multi-stakeholder groups that have come to these workshops over the last 9 years. But we did have an advocate for our project working with US Fish and Wildlife Service that was willing to contact the people that she knew personally to share our survey. And so that was kind of our initial way of getting the survey out there. Is all of the people, it was about 90 people that she sent the survey to that had participated in one of these workshops on one of these teams. And then from there, we asked everyone that completed the survey to please recommend other people that we could contact. So we used the snowball sampling approach. And in the end, only 37 surveys were completed. So that was about a 47% completion rate. So we had almost 80 people start the survey, but not everyone made it to the end. Some real fast, these are preliminary results, so I'm just giving you a summary of responses for the time being. We haven't done any analyses yet. So most of the people that responded to our survey were government agency employees, so most often US Fish and Wildlife Service or USGS. And among those people, in terms of what role they played in the team. Oops, excuse me. They were most often the decision maker or maybe a representative of the decision maker. And then this expert, this is scientific expert, local expertise, it's broadly defined. And in terms of did they reach a decision at the workshop, most of them did. Most actually reached a decision and are in the process of implementing it. But others didn't reach a decision until after, and they haven't implemented it, and some never reached a decision. So did SDM facilitate transparency and trade-offs and uncertainty? This is something that's really important for integration and buy-in and social capital. And by and large, most of the respondents agreed that it did actually facilitate. It made the issues that they were grappling with more transparent. Did it enable them to make a better decision than they would have otherwise? Yeah, for the most part, but not necessarily. And that's, I think, just more support for the idea that the process of engaging in structured decision making can have value and benefits and generate these useful social outcomes, regardless of whether or not you actually reach a decision during this 1 week workshop. After the workshop, this is number of respondents that used structured decision making with someone else that was on their workshop team but not from their same stakeholder group to address a different problem in the future. So this is like they met someone in that group and they decided to use SDM on a new problem. And about half did at least once. Did it help you develop a better understanding of others? So this is really important for the generation of social capital, and almost unanimously it did. It helped you develop trust, so this is an important element of that social capital that can enable collaboration in the long term. And for the most part it did. We had some people that recognized that there was someone in the group that was sent to sabotage the decision-making process, and I think this highlights the fact that you also need some social capital to begin this. And did it help you identify a common purpose? Everyone said that it did, and this is really important. It's a common purpose that can enable people to bind together towards some kind of group mission and can enable them to sustain collaboration even when there are setbacks and hardships. And did it help you reach consensus about priority stakeholder value? So which stakeholders' value should take priority? And there wasn't, some people disagreed or didn't really agree at all. And this is really interesting because it speaks to the fact that you don't have to have consensus on what's important. You can have these differences and still have a meaningful process. And it helped with this exchange of goods and services and resources, by and large, by everyone. And a few quick quotes. The SDM context, well-facilitated process. It can allow you to happily agree to disagree. And that's really important for long-term collaboration. Here it talks about the interaction increased, the team already had a functional dynamic. This speaks to the fact that you need some social capital to get some more social capital. And then just kind of this broader thinking that, better understanding of alternatives emerged from this system integration and better, more diverse representation. Our sample size, it's limited to people that participate in these workshops that are 1 week intensive workshops, almost all heavily involved the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to a large component. So it's, biased to some degree that doesn't speak to SDM in its total world application. We have a small sample size and we have yet to do analyses, but in conclusion, it seems so far based on the preliminary results that SDM does facilitate this integration, this integrative understanding of decision problems and can help you build and generate that social capital you need to deal with those. NCTC provides this enabling institution, so it provides a space that these groups can come have these boundary experiences beyond just their own experience within their own organization and people that just have the same views as them. They can cross those boundaries, create a common vision or a prototype decision that enables them to continue working together in the future. A little Helen Keller quote, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much," and that's really why it's important to generate social capital. SDM might be a good way to do that. Thank you.